In this video, we're going to create a resource report using the BrightWork Reporter web part. First, I'm going to navigate to a page that I want this report to appear on. And we'll edit the page by going up to the Page tab and selecting Edit Page so that I can add the web part to the page. I'll select the section of the page where I want the web part to go and click Add a Web Part. And I'll select the BrightWork Reporter category and then the Reporter web part and click Add to put it on the page. Once the web part is on the page, I can then stop editing and I'm ready to configure my report. To get into the Configure Reporter settings, I simply click on the hyperlink inside the web part. And now I can go through and select the data source for my report. Most of the time that'll be the reporter library, but occasionally you may want to use something like the work cache or one of the other caches for your report. Let's use the reporter library here, and since it's a work report, we're going to take the open work report definition and use that to create our resource report. The scope of the report is going to be the current site and all subsites, as we want to collect the data from all the project sites underneath where we're at. Here's where we pick the report type Resource Report, which is a special report in the BrightWork Reporter. The next section is the title of the report. We'll call this Open Work. Use the default setting for the Chrome type. And now we have to define for a resource report what columns we're going to use for the start date and the finish date. Next, we have to select the column that represents the effort that each resource is performing. In this case, we're going to select Work, which will collect the data from any of the work columns within the list as planned work, estimated work, actual work. The next part of this section tells you what calendar is being used and the amount of hours, working hours per day is available, what days of the week are work days, and what's the first day of the week. These are set in the active calendar and the regional settings of the site. If you want to use a custom work per days, you can also set that by selecting this toggle here and changing the amount of hours available. Next is the column settings, and we would want to see what columns we want to display in a resource report. And basically what we'll want to see is the title of the item that we're assigned to in position 1, the start date in position 2, the finish date in position 3, and the amount of work in position 4. We can also enable the link to the title to open up the item in a dialog if we want to in the report. Next we'll sort, and we'll want to sort by start date and then finish date. So selecting start date first and then sort by finish date. Now here is the important part of the resource report. We want to group on the assigned to as the very first or top grouping. Have that collapse so that when we first look at the report, we're seeing the roll-up of effort by resource for the reporting period that we're going to look at. Next, we're going to have a second grouping by project That way we can tell what projects are contributing to the overall allocation of the resource. Now the time scale is where we choose exactly what we're going to be looking at in terms of the scale of the report. Months and weeks is a good typical time scale for this type of report. And that combined with the window settings. Now, looking at this kind of data, it's best to look ahead for a few weeks. Looking behind isn't really helpful. So we're going to say 0 weeks behind, but I want to look 12 weeks ahead. So it will constantly update the scale to show me the next 12 weeks of planning for all my resources. The final section is the report display settings. Now, if any one of my resources has more hours allocated in a given week than there is the capacity to do them, in other words, if there's more than 40 hours in a week, then I want it to highlight that row for me so I can see where the overallocations are. And then let's do this. Let's only look at items that have allocation data in them, items where you've actually planned work for a given resource. This just makes the report easier to read by emphasizing alternating rows. Once I have all my settings in place, I simply click OK, and I will have a resource report using the BrightWork Reporter web part.